The grill hissed as the fat dripped into the coals, but all I could hear was the sound of her sister's voice slicing through the air like a knife dipped in poison. If he vanished tomorrow, I swear no one would even notice. Laughter. The kind that rolls in waves, not polite, not hesitant, the real kind. Her brother chuckled with a mouthful of ribs. Her mother covered her face like she couldn't believe what she just heard, though you could tell she loved it. Even Carrie, my wife, let out that loud bark of a laugh she saves for when she really wants to impress someone. I didn't move, didn't blink. I stared at the ketchup stain on the paper tablecloth and just existed. They kept laughing. The topic changed. Someone shouted for more beer. Carrie stood up and danced across the lawn to grab a speaker. The world resumed spinning, without me. So I stood up, lifted my hot dog like a glass of champagne, and whispered, "Challenge accepted." Nobody heard me. Nobody ever does. That night, I didn't drive home. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't leave a note. I left the grill tongs by the sink, still greasy. I walked out of that backyard with nothing but my wallet and the shirt that smelled like smoke and shame. I got in my car, drove until I hit a road with no streetlights, and turned off the engine. No one called. Not that night. Not the next day. Not the week after. And maybe that should have hurt more than it did, but honestly, it felt like the first honest moment I'd had in years. I rented a room under a fake name. Started paying in cash. Got a job where no one asked questions, where no one cared if you didn't talk much. I became a man no one remembered, exactly what they had joked about. But silence is deceptive. While they went on living, I was watching, listening, gathering pieces. And a year later, I have everything I need. The names, the messages, the photos, the truth. They wanted to pretend I didn't exist. Now, they're going to wish I didn't. A month into my disappearance, I stopped checking the news. Not that I expected to make headlines or anything. I just thought, maybe a post. Has anyone seen Daryl? Or a local thread. Maybe someone would care enough to type out my name. But nothing. Not even a text from Carrie. That's what confirmed it for me. They didn't miss me because I wasn't someone they were capable of missing. I kept to myself. I found work loading cargo at a dock 2 towns over. No ID checks, no questions, just hard labor and silence. I rented a trailer at the edge of a forgotten RV park, a rust-colored husk of a place that always smelled like engine oil and dying dreams. Perfect. But the silence didn't last forever. One day, while organizing some old receipts at the laundromat, I spotted something in the local circular, the kind of petty community paper nobody reads unless they're desperate to kill time between rinse and spin. Tucked between an ad for a carpet cleaning special and a story about a lost parrot was a photo that made my spine turn to ice. It was a picture of Carrie. She was wearing the same red dress she claimed had gone missing last fall. Her hair was pinned up, her makeup perfect, and she stood next to a man I didn't recognize, tan, tall, wearing sunglasses indoors like a jerk. The caption read, "Local fundraiser hosted by Carrie Lormer and Caleb R. Vincent." Carrie Lormer. Not Mrs. Daryl Shaw. Not my wife. She had started using her maiden name again. And Caleb? Never heard of him. He wasn't family. Not someone from our circle. But he had his hand on her lower back like he belonged there. At first, I thought, maybe it's innocent. Maybe she's doing PR for work. Maybe it's just her way of coping. But then I saw it. Behind them, on the event banner, was the name of the venue, the same lakeside resort we had once planned to visit for our 5th anniversary, before she canceled last minute claiming a work emergency. I remember the deposit we lost. The silent car ride. The way she said, "It's not a big deal." Apparently, it was a big deal now. Because she'd finally made it there, just not with me. I felt like the oxygen had been vacuumed out of the room. I walked out of the laundromat with wet clothes still in the machine. Drove in circles for an hour. Finally pulled into an empty parking lot and screamed into the steering wheel until my throat burned. I wasn't even angry that she'd moved on. What broke me was how quickly she'd erased me. Like I was an old sticker peeled off a laptop. Like I'd never been there at all. But it wasn't just her moving on that caught my attention. It was what happened next that flipped everything. 3 nights later, I got a call on the burner phone I kept just for emergencies. The number was unknown. I let it ring. Then again. Finally, on the 3rd try, I picked up and said nothing. A voice on the other end spoke quickly, nervously. It was female and trembling. "I don't know if this is still your number, but if it is, you need to know what they're saying. At the barbecue. They've been talking about it. The joke. Your disappearance. Caleb's involved. It wasn't just a joke." Click. No name. No details. Just that. And suddenly I wasn't just a man who walked away. I was a man who had something to uncover. Because if my vanishing was planned, if someone helped push me out for a reason, then it was no longer just about being forgotten. It was about being replaced. And I was going to find out who made the guest list, and who never wanted me there to begin with. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the old vinyl couch in the corner of the trailer, eyes glued to the water-stained ceiling, my fingers twitching with a cocktail of dread and adrenaline. That call, whoever she was, had cracked open something I'd worked hard to keep shut. And once that lock came loose, memories began tumbling out like loose nails from a rotten floorboard. The barbecue hadn't just been a bad day. It had been staged. Looking back, the jokes had been a little too sharp, the laughter a little too rehearsed. I remember thinking that Carrie looked unusually giddy, like she was on the edge of a great joke the rest of us weren't in on. And when I walked away, when I slipped out of her life without a trace, no one stopped me. Because maybe that had been the goal all along. I started searching. Not online. I wasn't stupid enough to risk logging into anything that could alert her or her circle. I had to do it old school. So I drove back to our old town under the guise of night, parked a few blocks from the house we once shared, and waited. And there she was, Carrie, coming out of the front door with Caleb. Not holding hands, not kissing, but too close for strangers. He walked her to the car like a man who belonged there. My car, actually. The gray Nissan I'd paid off 2 years ago. She still drove it. I watched as she laughed at something he said and leaned into his shoulder, the way she used to lean into mine before things turned cold. They drove off, and I followed. Far enough not to be seen, close enough to see where they'd go. They didn't go far. A suburban house 2 neighborhoods over. Big. White porch. Flag out front. Caleb's place. I parked half a block away and watched from the shadows. She didn't leave for almost an hour. When she did, she looked calmer. Lighter. Like someone who had just had something confirmed. I waited until the street was empty. Then I got out of the car and walked. No plan. No gloves. Just me, my stupid racing heart, and 100 questions. I peeked through Caleb's living room window. He was alone now, feet up, watching some late-night comedy special, beer in hand. And there, on the coffee table, was something that made my blood run cold. A photograph. Framed. Carrie, Caleb, and my dog. Murphy. She told me he'd run away. She cried when I left, and said he'd gotten spooked by fireworks and bolted. I'd even posted on local forums, begging for someone to help find him. But there he was, sitting like a proud little king on Caleb's couch, in a picture that looked far too cozy for strangers. I stumbled back to my car, nearly tripping over my own feet. My brain was a boiling kettle. My fingers twitched so hard I could barely turn the key in the ignition. This wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't just erasure. It was replacement. I needed answers, and I needed a way in. The phone call had come from someone close enough to know about the barbecue. Someone who regretted what had happened. So I took a risk. I found a prepaid phone and sent one message to Carrie's sister, Mandy. Just 5 words. You said I'd disappear. What? No name. No signature. Just the words. I waited. Minutes passed. Then hours. Nothing. Until just past 2 a.m., the phone lit up with a reply. We didn't mean for you to find out. But if you want the truth, meet me Thursday. Do not tell her. No address. Just coordinates. I typed them into an offline map app. An old cafe just outside the city. One that had gone out of business during the pandemic, but was rumored to still serve people if they knocked the right way. Why there? Why her? Why now? One thing was certain. I hadn't disappeared. I'd been erased. Carefully, cruelly, methodically. Thursday came wrapped in storm clouds and a low, rolling thunder that never seemed to strike, but hovered just enough to keep everything uneasy. I arrived at the address an hour early. It wasn't hard to find. An old brick cafe whose sign had been stripped away, windows boarded up with faded posters still clinging to the glass like desperate memories. There was a yellow newspaper vending machine still standing outside, stuffed with issues at least 2 years out of date. I stayed in the car, watching every passing vehicle, every pair of headlights that slowed or rolled by too quickly. It felt like I was waiting for a deal to go down, not a conversation. My palms were sweating. My leg wouldn't stop bouncing. I hadn't seen Mandy in over a year, not since that barbecue. She hadn't spoken to me then either, not directly. Just one of the many smirking faces around the table. Until now. At 6:52 p.m., a faded blue Prius pulled into the lot. The moment I saw the dented bumper and cracked headlight, I knew it was hers. She parked on the opposite end, far enough from me that it still gave her the option to run if she needed to. She stepped out cautiously, hood up, sunglasses on, even though the sun had already dipped behind the trees. She looked smaller than I remembered, like the weight of the last year had shrunk her. She walked to the side door of the cafe and knocked twice, paused, then once more. After a few seconds, the door creaked open. No one appeared, but she slipped inside like she'd done it before. I waited another minute, then followed. My heart felt like it was trying to punch its way out of my chest. Inside, the cafe smelled of damp wood and dust. Most of the furniture had been cleared out, save for one table in the back lit by a string of battery-powered lights. Mandy sat with her arms crossed, a bottle of water in front of her, eyes darting like she wasn't sure she could go through with this. She didn't say hi. She didn't even look up. "I shouldn't be doing this," she muttered. "You sent the message," I said, sitting across from her. She finally looked at me, and something in her expression cracked. Guilt? Regret? Fear? Maybe all of it. "We thought you were just gonna leave," she whispered. "We didn't know you'd vanish. That you'd go dark like that. Carrie was supposed to talk to you." "Talk to me?" I nearly laughed. "She let me disappear." "You all did." Mandy shook her head. "It wasn't the plan. Caleb, he's not who you think he is. He's not just a guy she met after you left. He was already in her life, before." "How long before?" "Almost 2 years." I went cold. "She met him at that conference in Denver. Remember that when she said she couldn't reschedule? She told you she was going with coworkers, but she didn't. He was there." She kept it quiet at first, but then it got serious. Like, too serious. "She said you were too dull to notice." I told her it wasn't fair. "But you didn't stop her," I interrupted. My voice was shaking. "You didn't tell me." She looked down. I didn't want to get in the middle. "You already were." She flinched. "The barbecue wasn't supposed to be like that. The joke was cruel. Yeah, but it was Carrie's idea. She said if you walked away, it would make things easier. She said she didn't have the heart to leave you herself." My stomach twisted. "And Caleb?" I asked. "Where does he fit into all this?" Mandy hesitated. Then she leaned in, voice low. "Caleb's not just her affair partner. He's her investor. That fundraiser you saw? He funds the new boutique she opened. The reason she wanted out of your marriage was so she could list herself as the sole owner. If you'd filed for divorce, you'd have rights to everything. But if you walked away, vanished, then she could claim abandonment. Full rights. Clean break." I sat there, stunned, speechless. She continued. "She even coached her friends to keep quiet. That's why no one reached out. She said you needed to figure yourself out, and everyone bought it." It all clicked. The coordinated silence. The immediate shift. The speed at which my name was scrubbed out of existence. It wasn't negligence. It was design. "She used me," I said, voice hollow. Mandy nodded slowly. "We all did." Silence fell between us. Outside, the thunder finally broke into rain, tapping against the metal roof like a slow, mocking applause. "She doesn't know I'm here," Mandy said, rising. "And if she finds out, she'll burn me too. But you deserve to know. You weren't crazy. You were just easy to ignore." With that, she left me sitting there, surrounded by nothing but broken furniture, old memories, and a storm that had taken too long to arrive. I didn't chase her. I didn't speak. I just sat in the dark. Not because I was defeated, but because, for the first time, I could finally see the game board. And now? Now it was my move. I drove all night after the meeting with Mandy. The storm followed me the entire way, thudding against the windshield like a warning, like the sky itself didn't want me to dig deeper. But it was too late. I couldn't unhear what she told me. 2 years. Carrie had been planning my erasure for 2 years. She didn't cheat and feel guilty. She didn't stumble into something she couldn't undo. She built a machine out of silence, manipulation, and false kindness, and I had oiled every gear with my own blind loyalty. Back at the trailer, I pulled out a notebook I hadn't touched in months. It used to hold petty thoughts, scribbles about bad dreams, things I'd missed from my old life. Now it became a map. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Erasure timeline." I started connecting dates. Denver trip, boutique registration, change in bank statements, the barbecue, the fundraiser, Caleb, Murphy. The dog was more than a lie, he was proof. He was living evidence of the life they started before I even walked away. It became obvious that I hadn't just been erased. I had been repositioned, rewritten. If I'd filed for divorce, I'd have rights to the property. If I tried to contest anything, I could have claimed assets. But by vanishing without a word, Carrie could plead abandonment, a clean exit. No spousal support. No complications. No division of the boutique, which she claimed she had built from scratch. But now I had names, dates, a motive, and something else, a sliver of leverage. That night, I pulled out the burner phone and used a private messaging app to send a new message. Not to Mandy this time. To someone who had never blocked me because they had no reason to. My old coworker, Neil. Neil and I weren't close friends, but he was a decent guy. Honest. A single dad with a drinking problem he didn't hide. Most people avoided him because he talked too much, but I remembered that about him. He noticed things. He worked in shipping for the same warehouse where I had been manager, and he still had access to the old cameras and logs. I sent him a message. Hey, need your help. Something bad happened. I'll explain everything. Can you give me camera footage from the lot behind the warehouse from February 17th last year? That was the night I remembered Carrie showing up unexpectedly. She had texted me out of nowhere, said she wanted to bring me lunch. That had never happened before, not in years. She was sweet that day. Touchy. Flirty. She said I looked tired, overworked. She said maybe we should take a vacation soon. At the time, I thought she was being supportive. I now realized she was checking whether I'd noticed the money she had already moved out of our joint savings 2 days before. Neil responded the next day. Short and to the point. Footage still exists. Weird stuff on it. Can't explain in text. Where can we meet? We set a time. I drove out to meet him in a rundown bar by the edge of town, the kind where no one asked who you were or why you looked like you hadn't slept in 3 days. Neil came in carrying an old hard drive and a grocery bag. He slid it across the table. I hadn't even spoken yet when he said, "You're not paranoid." I saw her. I blinked. Saw her what? That day, he said, glancing around nervously. Your wife came to the lot, but she didn't bring you lunch. She parked in the back and met with some guy in a black SUV. He gave her an envelope. She looked inside and laughed. Then she drove off. I stared at him. Are you sure? He nodded. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be that guy, you know? Sticking my nose where it doesn't belong. But you vanished not long after, and the gossip at work was that you went off the rails. I always thought there was more. I took the hard drive home, copied everything, and spent the night scrubbing through the grainy footage. There she was, Carrie in her gray coat with the fur-lined collar, smiling as she shook hands with a man whose face never turned to the camera. But the SUV's license plate did. I froze the frame and wrote it down. 3 days later, I found out it was registered to a consulting firm, a shell company. And the address on record? The same office building where Caleb Vincent lists his private business address on the boutique's financial disclosures. So that's how deep it went. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about leaving me. It was business. And I wasn't just the husband she grew tired of. I was the obstacle they had to financially remove. She played me. Or rather, she managed me. Just another item on her to-do list. But now, for the first time, I had something they didn't expect. Evidence. And if Carrie built her new life on a foundation of silence and control, all I had to do was knock loud enough to make the whole house tremble. I didn't go straight for the jugular. That's not who I am. Not really. And maybe that's part of why this all happened in the first place, because I'm the type who waits, thinks, gives the benefit of the doubt. I used to believe that made me loyal. Turns out, it just made me convenient. But now, I had something Carrie didn't expect me to have. Patience wrapped in purpose. I wasn't coming back to scream or sabotage. I was going to dismantle her world in the same quiet way she dismantled mine, piece by calculated piece. The first step was visibility. I created a new email. Not in my name, no. I used an old inside joke she'd completely forgotten. Muffin Man 38. Back in college, she'd once said I made muffins so bad they could be considered a war crime. It was dumb, but she laughed for hours. That name became our joke. A decade later, I used it as the name of the sender who would gently start tugging at the seams of her new life. The first email went to the press, a small local lifestyle blog that did puff pieces on small businesses and community leaders. Carrie had recently been featured in one of their posts, a 2-page spread with bright photos of her boutique, her vision, and a quote about how she built it all from humble beginnings and personal resilience. I sent them a polite message. You may want to fact-check your recent feature on Carrie Lormer. She's not quite the self-made woman she claims. A quick look into the property records, business funding trails, and name changes might reveal a more complicated and legally questionable story. Also, check plate number QYX78L in relation to Caleb Vincent. Ask what was in the envelope she received behind Arlo Shipping Company on February 17th last year. Just trying to help your journalism stay honest. 38-inch. No accusations. No demands. Just breadcrumbs. Enough for a real journalist to start sniffing around. I knew that blog wouldn't take it seriously, but I also knew Carrie read it religiously. She loved seeing her name in it. She posted every article on her boutique socials like it was a Vogue cover. The second email went to a different target, someone far closer. To Denise. Denise was Carrie's assistant, or studio coordinator, as she called herself. 26, overly enthusiastic, and so addicted to validation, you could practically hear her self-esteem wheezing every time she blinked. She worshipped Carrie, not because she liked her, but because she wanted to be her. But worshippers are brittle. All it takes is one tremor to make them crack. I sent Denise a much shorter message, one that hit closer to home. Do you really think she's going to keep you around after the expansion? She said you're too emotional for retail management. Ask Caleb what she said about you after the anniversary event. You deserve better. 38-inch. I waited and watched. It didn't take long. The next morning, Carrie's boutique social account posted a cheerful photo of a new clothing rack and tagged Denise. By lunchtime, the post was deleted. And that same afternoon, Denise's personal Instagram showed her out drinking with a cryptic caption, "Tired of being used. New beginnings soon." Phase 1 had begun. But the real spark, the one I knew would set fire to her carefully constructed image, came from Neil. I'd asked him for one more favor. To leave an unmarked envelope at the doorstep of the lifestyle blog office. Inside it, a printed still of the February 17th footage. A shot of Carrie smiling, envelope in hand, Caleb's black SUV still in frame. And beside it, 2 printouts. One from her business registration, listing herself as sole proprietor due to spouse's abandonment, and one showing a funds transfer from our joint account that occurred 2 days before I vanished. It wasn't just shady. It was fraud. She'd claimed I disappeared suddenly, left her with nothing, forced her to pick up the pieces alone, all while stealing from me and aligning herself with a man who financed her exit. That week, the blog ran a quiet retraction. No explanation. Just a note that their article on Carrie Lorimer was temporarily suspended pending review. That alone wouldn't ruin her. But it got her attention. I knew it did because I saw her. 3 days later, as I sat at a diner on the outskirts of town eating dry pancakes, she walked in. Alone. No Caleb. No assistant. No bright smile. She scanned the room like she was looking for someone. And then, without a word, sat down at the booth directly across from me. I stared. She stared back. Her eyes didn't look angry. They looked nervous. Like she finally realized the shadow she'd ignored had returned. Not to beg, not to cry, but to unmake everything. She leaned in. "You should have just stayed gone, Daryl," she whispered. I smiled, the kind of smile I hadn't worn in over a year. "Funny," I said. "That's what I told myself before I realized you were counting on it." The silence between us stretched longer than it should have. Carrie didn't touch the water the waitress brought her. I didn't either. The fork in my hand hovered over a slice of rubbery pancake, forgotten. I was watching her, really watching her. Not the polished, rehearsed Carrie who smiled through Instagram filters and charity photo shoots. This version looked like someone who hadn't slept. Hair tied too tight, makeup forced on trembling skin, a flickering panic behind her eyes she couldn't quite hide. She finally broke the silence. "Whatever you think you're doing, Daryl, it won't change anything." I tilted my head. "Funny. That's exactly what you counted on, that I'd never try to change anything." Her mouth twitched, just slightly. That old look, the one she'd flash when I made a joke that hit a little too close to the truth. But this wasn't a joke, and she knew it. "You made your choice," she said, voice low even. "You left. You disappeared. I didn't make you do that." "No," I said slowly, "but you did everything you could to hope I would. And then you turned it into a business strategy." Her jaw clenched. "That's not what happened." I reached into my coat pocket and slid a folded paper across the table, a copy of the boutique's registration, time-stamped 1 week after I left, listing her as the sole proprietor due to irreconcilable abandonment by spouse. Her own signature was circled in red ink. "Explain that then." She stared at it, didn't touch it, but her fingers curled into fists beneath the table. You weren't supposed to come back, she finally said. You weren't supposed to exist anymore. And there it was. The truth, bare and bitter. I waited. Let it hang between us like a grenade without a pin. Then I leaned forward. You know what the worst part is? It's not that you cheated, or lied, or took the dog. It's that you looked me in the eye, year after year, and pretended I didn't matter. Like I was just some background furniture you couldn't be bothered to move. Carrie's voice went sharp. You always acted like a victim. Per Daryl. The quiet one. The good guy. You think being passive makes you noble? It just made you easy to walk over. You let this happen. No, I said quietly. You planned this. You manipulated people. You gamed the system. And you dragged others into it because you thought I'd stay silent. She laughed, dry, bitter. And what? You think blowing up my life will fix yours? You think ruining me will unerase you? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The flicker in her, I told me she already knew. This wasn't about revenge. This was about presence. She'd spent so long reducing me to a footnote, I became the story she thought no one would tell. The waitress came by. Everything okay over here? Carrie forced a smile. Yes, thank you. I held her gaze. Just catching up. Once the waitress walked off, Carrie's posture shifted. Less defiant, more calculating. She glanced around the diner, 2 other booths, a guy behind the counter staring at his phone. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then she leaned in again, this time almost whispering. What do you want, Daryl? It was the first time she'd asked me that question in years. I almost didn't know how to answer. But then, it came to me clear, unshakable. I want you to tell the truth. Publicly. To your clients, your partners, your family. I want you to say what you did. What you stole. Not just from me. From everyone. She scoffed. And if I don't? I slid a flash drive across the table. She stared at it like it was radioactive. Then I let the truth tell itself. Her hands didn't move. She didn't reach for the flash drive. But her breathing had changed faster, shallow. I'd seen her lie before, but now? She wasn't just panicked. She was cornered. You think this won't come back on you? She hissed. You think you can stir this up without consequences? I stood. Dropped a 20 on the table. I already lived the consequences. You just didn't think I'd survive them. She sat there frozen as I walked out, the flash drive still between us. Outside, the rain had started again, soft, steady. I stood beneath the awning of the diner, letting it hit my shoes, letting the cold air clear my head. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because for the first time since that barbecue, I was the one leaving her behind. The rain didn't stop for 2 days. It was poetic, in a way, like the whole world was trying to wash itself clean while I quietly rebuilt something I didn't even know I still had. I didn't go back to the trailer. I left it behind like the broken version of me who once lived there. Instead, I checked into a small guest house near the coast, the kind of place with peeling paint and crooked picture frames, but warm coffee and no questions asked. It was enough. For now. The flash drive I'd given Carrie? She never returned it. But the ripple effect began almost immediately. 3 days after our confrontation at the diner, the boutique's social media accounts were wiped. No farewell. No announcement. Just gone. A week later, a small headline appeared on a local business bulletin. Lormer Boutique transferred to silent partner after internal restructuring. Her name was absent from the new filings. And then the real twist came. Denise, the assistant I'd reached out to, posted a message online. It wasn't long, but it was loud enough to be heard. Sometimes, you give everything to someone who's already written the ending without you in it. Glad I got out before I lost myself, too. The truth always finds daylight. No names. But everyone who'd been paying attention knew what she meant. I didn't release the full video. I didn't have to. The quiet shame Carrie was facing was far more permanent than anything public. Her power wasn't built on strength, it was built on perception. On curation. Once cracks formed in that image, it all began to crumble without me having to push it over. And then, something strange happened. I stopped feeling bitter. I stopped needing to prove anything. One morning, I woke up, brewed a pot of coffee in the tiny guest house kitchen, and sat on the porch watching the fog lift from the trees. For the first time in I don't know how long, I didn't feel invisible. I wasn't chasing closure. I had it. Not because she gave it to me, but because I reclaimed it. I got a job offer from a nonprofit that helps people transition after financial abuse. The director had read the leaked snippets of my story. Apparently someone on the blog had shared pieces anonymously. He said they needed someone quiet, observant, careful. Someone who knew what it meant to disappear and come back on their own terms. I said yes. A month later, I adopted a dog. Not a replacement for Murphy. Nothing could be, but a new start. Her name's Nora. She chews through anything you leave on the floor and growls in her sleep, but she never pretends I don't exist. Sometimes I still hear from people from that old life. Mandy sent a message once. I don't expect forgiveness, but I respect what you did. It was enough. Not perfect, but enough. As for Carrie, I heard she moved to another state, rebranded, tried to start over. That's fine. I wish her no harm. I really don't. Because I'm no longer stuck in the past she built around me. I've got my own life now. And it's quiet. Honest. Mine. So if you're reading this, and you feel like you've been erased, let me say this clearly. You're still here. You still matter. And your story, your real story, is not over yet. Mine wasn't either. It just had to begin with a hot dog and a whisper. Challenge accepted. And I'm glad I did.